the Budget Advisory Commission meeting for June 10th, 2011 to order. This is Vice Chair Jonathan King chairing. I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. We're very lucky to live and work in the unceded territories of the Dena'ina people, something that we can be grateful for every day. And also with the announcement that I'll be chairing the meeting today because Chair Rodriguez has a new addition to her family. Let me hold on just a second here. I'm going to pull up the details for everyone. Lennon Wynn Rodriguez has joined the world about 2 weeks ago. Mom and baby and sibling are all doing well, but are all really, really tired. So there's a new addition to the family. So with that, Lance, would you do the roll call?
I will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as for the, I know that some of you are here, but for the record, Anna Raleigh. I think I know I can see her online. I'm going to count her here.
Yes, sorry, I was just in the middle of switching devices, so I'm here.
That's okay. Carolyn Hall.
Here.
Lindsay Hobson.
Here.
Thank you, Lindsay. Tasha Hatch.
Here.
Thank you, Tasha. Nolan Clouda.
Here.
Carla McDonald. McConnell. Jimmy Miner.
Here.
James Smallwood.
Here.
All right. Thank you, Thank you, everyone. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
All right, that's lovely, and happy nearly summer, everyone. Okay, with that, our first item up is approval of the agenda. I have a motion to approve.
This is Anna. I'll move to approve the agenda.
I'll second it.
Okay, it was James was the second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so we're on to the agenda. So our agenda today is the very first thing is action items is consider the selection of the chair and vice chair, and then we'll move into informational reports. So Lance, would you like to take us through item 5 on the agenda?
Sure. I think last week we talked about, or last month we talked about the BACs should be thinking about selecting a chair and vice chair. And at that time, we had 3 members that are currently serving. 2 of them have been reappointed, Jonathan being one, and I think Lindsay Hobson was the other one. And then Jimmy has asked to be continue his service on the BAC. So that is going to the assembly. So we'll get that. Actually, that might have happened on Tuesday. I'd have to go back and look. So normally the terms end in June, and want to make sure that if you guys want to select a chair and vice chair, it's customary that you do that sometime either in June or July. And so that's why I put it down here as a consider. We talked a little bit about it last month, and I don't know if you've talked among yourselves, but the chair is obviously not here today. So Jonathan, if you want to take this up now and seek nominations without Alyssa, and I think Lindsay is the only one who's on and also not here, I'll leave it to the members of the BAC.
Okay. First, I'd just like to hear opinions from the field. Yes, Anna.
Yeah, I had a question just as a new member. So, because the most public-facing role of the chair and vice chair is running these meetings, and I'm sorry if I'm not sure if that's an audio problem or not. Oh, anyway, so I was just curious, kind of what the duties of the chair and vice chair are beyond, what you're doing right now.
So the duties of the chair and the vice chair, the primary duties of the chair, and Jonathan, jump in. Nolan, you can jump in as well as a past press chair. Other than running these meetings, help basically coordinate the agenda, but also have a responsibility to once a month participate and join in on Assembly Budget and Finance Committee meeting. And there is a place on the agenda where the BAC chair provides an update and a report on the BAC's activities, but also learns about any activities that the assembly might be interested in the BAC doing and passes those on. There are times when the administration will call on a BAC chair or vice chair to help them with particular matters, ask their advice, participate in some other activities. And then probably the last big piece would be, as at the end of the year, it's customary that at least for the last 4 or 5 years, the BAC chair and vice chair have helped sort of set the agenda for a strategy session for the rest of the BAC members on the things that they would like to do, sort of set that format together, work with me and the department to make sure that those things are illustrated correctly, and then we kind of manage it. So strategy session, monthly attendance of assembly meetings, chairing these, and then occasionally get asked by the administration to help them on other topics. So I think Nolan or Jonathan, if I missed anything, please jump in. But honestly, Anna, I think those are the highlights.
Yeah, go ahead, Nolan.
Yeah, that's what I think. Lance captures it really well. I think probably like the most important duty and the one that you put the most time into outside of the meetings is the monthly reports to the assembly budget finance committee. It's definitely something you put a little bit of thought into planning those updates and then conveying any information from the assembly back to the group. But otherwise, as far as like the overall time commitment outside of the meetings, it's not huge overall.
Okay, James has his hand raised. Pop in, James.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Has the current and current vice chair expressed their desire to continue on with their position, or will their term be ending soon? I'm just kind of curious if we need to, if they still want to continue on in their current position.
So I haven't talked with Alyssa. I know that, well, neither of our terms are ending in this month. Mine was just renewed, so the hook's in the back for another 3 years, which is great. I think I haven't talked with Alyssa. My sense is that she would probably continue on, but I have not talked with her. The other thing we did with Nolan's chairmanship is that we ran that for 2 years, which I actually think worked really well for us to have that kind of 2-year cycle there. And it also seems to me that we didn't, Lance, when did we select Alyssa last year?
I want to say it was later in the year, maybe in September or October.
Right. So in this case, Alyssa's really only had 8 months as chair. So I'll just put out my feelings. My feeling would be to support Alyssa as chair. I would also prefer for her to be here and maybe to do this in July but that being said, we have a fair amount of quorum here today. And so if it were the will of the group to get it done, I'd be happy to chair getting that done. But I mean, I think there are some pretty strong reasons, given that the chair isn't here, to wait until July.
So can I make a motion to table this until next month?
So we have
Right,
a motion in front of us to table this until next month.
This is
yes,
Anna.
Nolan.
I'll second that if there's discussion also.
Okay, so Anna has seconded discussion. Nolan.
Through the chair, is there any consideration here of a change of administration happening between now and July? Does that affect our decision for chair in any way?
I don't think there will be any new members joining us between now and July. There is a vacant seat. So, I mean, if they found someone and got it through the assembly, we could have a new member, but certainly there won't be a wholesale change in the body given that we're on 3-year terms.
So in other words, there isn't like a reason that we need to like make a quick decision on this right now at this meeting as far as this goes. Because I agree, I would like to have Alyssa stay. I actually texted her just now that she's got her hands full. I would definitely want to hear from her if she wants to continue. And I would also, I also agree with the continuity part of it, but it might be a good thing to actually table.
Okay. And for the verbal record, a message came in from Lila that Carla is present and she's on the phone. So for the record, Carla is present at today's meeting. Any other thoughts here? We have a motion to table that has been seconded. Any other discussion? All right, well, let's call the question on the motion. All in favor of the motion to table this until July, say aye or raise your hand in some way.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we are tabled until July, when we'll make sure that Alyssa is here. So thank you everyone for the great discussion here. All right, informational reports. Up first is our assembly report. Who do we have here from the assembly?
I brought him in this morning when I came in.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if.
Good morning, Eric. Or good afternoon.
Hello.
We have a little.
Yeah.
There you go. I've muted where the interference was coming from. So Lance, you don't know if we have an assembly report?
I don't think that I have Assembly Member LaFrance or Assembly Member Perez-Perdilla.
So,
Cameron accepted and Ms. LaFrance was tentative. So I don't have a report from them, and I don't believe Desiree is on. I'm going to give them a shot at it before I pinch hit for them.
okay. And as the paper let me know this morning, it's now Assembly Chair LaFrance is probably one of the updates.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's hold that just in case and see if one of them pops up, and then maybe Jim Anderson from the school district is on the phone, so perhaps we can move to the school district report and come back to the assembly if need be.
That'd be great.
All right.
Hi, good morning. This is, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
This is Jim Anderson. Unfortunately, I can see text and do text, and I can call in. I can't tell if the slide, if the files are up or not. I'll assume Layla's got the Anchorage School District General Fund budget variance slide up. If you look at the first page, it's all about revenue, local, state, and federal. So I'll walk you through some of the changes in that this year, then go to expenses, and then I'll provide what we currently believe our projected fund balance will be at the end of this fiscal year. If someone will let me know if that page is up, I can start talking through it, and I think we can get through this.
You're good to go, Jim.
Okay, perfect. So if you look at the upper left, you'll see the boxes where it talks about the general fund, the FY 2021 budget, that's this current year, the projection for the end of the year. As many of you know, we always brief this again in August with the final fund balance, and you'll see this year why that's going to be even more important for this commission. So I will start with revenue for local sources. You'll see that the property taxes and state revenue are both lower due to lower enrollment and much lower intensive needs counts. The district had about 3,500 students go to private schools, statewide correspondence, move out of state, or to another district at the beginning of this school year. So that necessitated a significant reduction in state revenue, which prompted lower local revenue. And we also had far fewer intensive needs students as they weren't coming to the district because we couldn't provide the resources. If you go a little bit lower, you'll see interest earnings are trending down due to lower federal funds rates. We see that in the housing market as well. So we're a little bit less. We still made some money, but certainly a little bit less. Under E-rate, as you move your way down, a little over $500,000 above what we originally budgeted. And this was from multiple prior year disputes that we had with the federal program. And we ended up winning back about just over $500,000. So that was great news. It was related to upgraded wireless endpoint hardware from several years ago. If you look under other local revenues, we factored in, as you move across to the right, $8.3 million in fund balance that we used to be able to prep to open schools last fall and to keep things like help teachers and other stuff in the district as we move through the school year. A little bit lower, the state PFD raffle. This is somewhat new. We were surprised last year when we received a little bit of money. We knew it was coming. It's very difficult to project how much we'll get. We have been told that that will increase slightly in the years to come, as it looks like more people are picking PFD raffle as part of their PFD filing. The PERS and TERS on behalf payments, although they technically within the state are real money, they really are paper transactions for us. The revenue always matches expenditures. These are the contributions that the state provides to the retirement plans on the district's behalf, and the district's required to report the transactions. So though we don't personally ever see the money, we do report that flow into the retirement system. If you go a little bit lower, you'll see that Medicaid is quite a bit lower than budgeted. Most of our students where we receive Medicaid are occupational therapy for speech or physical conditions, predominantly in the special education community, although it does go into our general core as well. But it really was because we didn't have school in person that first semester. We do expect to see another $2.9 million in FEMA funding for this FY, but it's very difficult to determine when you will actually receive those checks from FEMA. So overall, at the end of revenue, we were down about $20.7 million, about 3.3%, and that includes the $8.3 million from fund balance usage. If there aren't any questions, I will go to the next page, which is general fund expenditures. Okay, I know now that everyone's getting excited. Go ahead.
No, I was just checking, Jim, to see if there were questions. Keep rolling forward.
Okay, I think everyone's getting out the popcorn now because we're getting to expenditures. Again, we'll start at the top. Salaries and benefits, you'll see by and large all lower than projected. When we knew that we were going to have a significant reduction in enrollment during the year, we had a lot of open vacancies that we intentionally didn't fill, and we kept vacant for as long as we could, and some of them kept vacant throughout the whole year. So that was about 245 FTE, full-time equivalent personnel. We did have the admin, principals, operations and maintenance, all settle their contracts after the budget was created. So there were some slight overages, about 2% per bargaining group. Additionally, maintenance required a significant amount of overtime preparing for schools to reopen. They built probably close to 20,000 plexiglass or plastic barriers, and all of the hand wash stations and everything else across the district. So you do see their overtime going up quite a bit. Teachers' assistants are projected about 13% under budget. By and large, that's due to not having face-to-face school in the first semester. Same for teacher substitutes, significantly lower than projected. And then you look at certificated employees. So they are projected to be under budget by about $5 million, a little over, primarily driven by vacancies in special service teachers. I know several folks on this commission are aware that we really struggle with special service teachers, occupational therapists, physical therapists, all of those positions, despite the fact that we did not intentionally keep any of those positions vacant this year. And we're very hopeful. We've amped up our recruiting program to try to clean that up before next year. The extra duty, extra help section underneath expenditures, a lot of that is for all the coaches and extra time teachers spend for student activities. And naturally this year with not doing every sport and activity, and if we were doing them at a lower level, those expenses were significantly less. The other category is predominantly leave accrual and usage, noon duty personnel at lunchtime, and safety security personnel. The overage is primarily due to people taking less leave during the year because of COVID flying restrictions. People didn't have to take leave if they could work remotely. So we expect that to get back to normal. So after attrition, we had about a surplus of 5.8 million or 1.7%. As you scroll down to the benefits category, all of the benefits are tied to lower number of personnel. So you'll see that medical is projected significantly under budget. Not only did we have less people, but we had way less injuries at work, sicknesses, our workers' comp dropped. All of those things under the benefit really are related to working from home where there's less accidents and illnesses and lower numbers of personnel. If you look at services, the utilities are expected to be under budget, primarily driven by savings in electricity, water, sewer, natural gas, and trash during the first semester. It did start picking back up more towards normal towards the end of the second semester. Liability insurance and claims, as we go a bit lower, are expected to be under budget. We had quite a bit less liability claims against the district, merely for having far fewer personnel in the buildings for the bulk of the year. So at the end of the day, about $16 million under budget for expenses, or about 2.4%. If you go to the third page, because this is a little difficult to brief, I'll probably stop at this page. This is the summary of our fund balance projection as of just a couple days ago for 30 June, which is the end of our fiscal year. So as you go from top to bottom, you'll see the unassigned fund balance at the beginning of the start of this year was $30 million. We have always, for many years, Lance knows better than me probably how long it goes back, but at least a decade or more, the district always reserves about 4% plus of our fund balance for bond rating, and that helps both the municipality and the district maintain a AAA rating and get the best rates we can when we sell bonds. Right below that is the subsequent year expenditures. We had
Hey, Jim.
planned. Yes.
James would like to ask a question, so I don't want to let you get too far ahead without letting him pop in. So pop in, James, and enlighten us.
I can wait till he's done. He might even answer my question. So please go ahead, Jim.
Okay. So the subsequent year's expenditures, that was the use of fund balance for everything from help teachers to other expenditures we knew late last school year that we were going to plan on using this year. As you go down, you look at the current revenue expenditures and other sources. Those mirror the first 2 pages of this brief, and I kind of went maybe more detail than you wanted in that, but you will see ultimately a shortfall of about $9 million, primarily due to significantly lower revenue for less students. Then a change in designated fund balances was slight. Then we look at the projected ending undesignated fund balance. The unassigned, which is the money that we can actually use in an emergency, fires, earthquakes, whatever it might be, is about $33.5 million. We are going to retain the bond rating because we must. And so that's our projected undesignated fund balance of $58.99 million. If you look down in the bottom, you'll see a green block and a pink block. I'll go through the green one because I think that's the most realistic one. You can see now how we take the expenditures because fund balance, the remaining fund balance is the undesignated projected fund balance divided by the number of expenses, and that's how you get the percentage for the calculation. So we have the expenditures, which we talked about, and you can see total projected to include some PERS TERS on behalf, and we'll have a state fund balance projected of 9.52%. On the bottom below that in pink is if we have to use fund balance to pay student nutrition deficit, it'll drop below 8%. So this year, all summer long, we fed students. We fed them very inefficiently. We fed them across the city all throughout the first semester, even when schools weren't open for business. Instead of taking 1 or 2 people to support an elementary school, it was taking many times more to be able to operate under COVID conditions and to be able to provide remote food service. So we did lose a significant amount of money, approximately $10 million, just from the way we operated student nutrition. For those who don't know, we get a certain amount of money from the federal government for every meal we hand out, regardless of how much it costs to make that meal. So when you're putting all these resources to feed 100 kids, but even when you feed them, you're only selling 1/10 the number of meals every day that you normally would, you're certainly going to have a deficit. We saw a huge pickup in once we brought kids back to school. We have the largest summer school we've had, as I stated, in years, close to 6,000 plus students. And so as a result, we're making more in student nutrition than we've ever made in a summer program. So we'll see at the end of this month how much that is. We're also trying to get approval to use federal relief funds to pay that $10 million. I personally think it's a valid use, but we don't get to make that call. So at the very worst case, the federal government and the states say no, it would drop our fund balance, but I believe it will be in the green box, and we should hover around 9.5% at the end of the year.
All right.
And James, sir, you had a question?
I do. I'm just curious, Jim. Will you at some point be able to show us or have a report that deals with specifically expenses that were caused by COVID? So looking at what was the expenses, extracting the things that were related to COVID, and I'm just curious to see what that would look like.
Oh, James, that's a great idea. I could go through, assuming the commission agrees or wants me to do this, next time we do a BAC meeting, we could talk about COVID expenses as far back as the beginning of COVID, which for us was the Friday before spring break last March. I mean, I wouldn't be able to go through every single contract and everything, but I can certainly cover all of the broad categories and quite a few of the details on where we spent both operational funds and grant funds.
Yeah, that'll be good to see.
Yeah, I think that would be really educational, and we can work with staff to get that into our agenda, because I think that, I mean, 20 minutes spent there, I think would be very educational for us. Any other questions for Jim? Okay. I do want to say, Jim, I work out of my house, and I'm watching the kids go to school in the morning, and it's pretty cool because they look really happy to be going. So I think it's clearly having an impact. And so I'm glad that it's helping budgetarily, but it's also really great that the kids are having that opportunity this year. Anna has her hand up. Anna, come on in.
Yeah, thanks. I was just wondering, I know you mentioned vacant positions that you hadn't filled and some of the kind of hiring challenges. I just wondered if there's other kind of areas where you're seeing it's hard to find folks, or if you are actually actively hiring right now.
Well, we are seeing what the rest of Anchorage is also seeing, which is the very lowest paid hourly positions. We struggled hard trying to fill student nutrition, transportation, not custodial so much. The union has done a great job of providing us with a good workforce. But really, it was that lower paid where, frankly, people could make more money on unemployment than what they would make if they worked. I think that's common across the service industry, across the state, probably to include the lower 48. And we saw those exact same problems and still have them, to be honest.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see if people come back to these jobs, or if a permanent or semi-permanent wage increase is required to bring them back. That may be one of the results. Any other questions for Jim?
Okay. Well, thank you all. I will go on mute for the rest of the meeting. Thanks for what you
Jim.
do.
Sorry, I muted myself there. So now we're on to the next agenda item, which I actually here it comes back. The OMB report. And Lance, this may be your last OMB meeting. Is that correct, or would you have July as well? You would. This is it, right? Oh, on mute.
Yes, thank you. I think this may be it. I think it's traditional that the incoming administration makes some changes on the budget office as well as some of the other ones. I don't know what kind of decisions they have made yet, but I have talked to them a couple times. I've expressed some interest to stick around, and but I think if history repeats itself, you will still have an amazing OMB team here, but it's likely that you'll have someone else leading it. So, but hopefully I'm not going to go far. The next meeting is scheduled for July 1st. The mayor takes office July 1st, and at that point, unless assigned some other duty, I will be the director that day till otherwise done. But yep.
So it may literally depend on the timing of the mayoral inauguration and the commencement of this meeting.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, would you take us into this month's OMB report?
I will. So the first one, I'm going to start off with a slight apology. The first one has to do with the scheduling of department head reviews. I literally have been, I've just been busy and I haven't had a chance to get to that. Thanks to Lila, who has been pinging me on a constant basis to sort of set these things up. But the other thing that I will say is, normally in the budget cycle years, the budget is, the operating budget from department heads is starting to be received, basically in later June, sometimes in July, with guidance from the mayor in June. But as with the incoming Berkowitz administration, everything was about 30 days delayed, which made OMB's time really tight towards the end in developing it. But I'm still going to, in the next 3 weeks, get some of these things scheduled, at least with the departments that I'm pretty sure that we're not going to have some changes as much as I might know that. And then obviously we've already got some changes announced in the fire department and the attorney's office. So I think my plan now is to continue to try to get these set up for you. It will be with me, if I can do them in the next couple of weeks, with the budget analyst if they're in July, and with the finance person in each of those individual departments. And I will start getting those booked together. And again, I really was hoping that we could start these earlier this month, later in June. Or later in May and June. I literally have not had the opportunity to do it. I've been working with the transition team, trying to get information, and it's been a little distracting, but no excuse. I just haven't had a chance to get to it. So I will endeavor to make it happen in the next couple of weeks, at least get some of them set up. So that is it.
Okay. That's it. All right. Well, the agenda keeps disappearing on me.
Lila, can you bring the agenda back up? Oh, so
Oh.
Lila was changing her screenshot. Lila is.
Thank you, Lila.
She's showing the next item up for up. Lila, can you make that a little bigger, or maybe maybe it's just my screen? There we go. Well, little bit smaller. Then we might get back to the original. All right, that's good. Let's work with this. So what I'm going to walk you through now is the our final draft year-end 2020 fiscal year 2020 budget to actuals report. I think yesterday the controller has closed all of the actuals. They do it in months period, and so basically as of yesterday, or maybe it was Tuesday, they have got to a point where they have actuals submitted to the auditors in draft form. Let me start. I've mentioned this in the past. This report will go to, this is a final draft. The final is going to go to the assembly on the 22nd of June. But for you, I kind of want to highlight a couple things before we get going. Obviously, 2020 was unique in so many ways, and it affects the influence of what you see in budget to actuals, because we have had an influx of other dollars after the budget was approved, primarily CARES funds that were, or COVID relief funds that were used for first responder payroll, and then those funds that were given to departments that are to be issued out in grants. So if that makes sense, I'm going to explain this sheet here. This is a summary sheet by department. Departments on the right, the approved, or excuse me, the revised budget from April of 2020 shows how those budgets might have been adjusted. The next one is supplementals. Supplementals are additional budget given to departments after April. So the purple column, that starts with purple on the top, is the new total, that's their new budget with the supplementals. And then obviously actuals. And then in the middle is the percent of the budget spent at that point in time. And then if they had, at the year end, there should be no budget encumbered. It's all spent. As I will talk about the next report, which is the 2021, we do have encumbrances. It's basically putting money aside for bills that we know we're going to have to be putting cash out the door. So if we go all the way to the right, there's a few columns I really want to point out to you. So the first one is, let me get my sheet. The first one is the CFO. You'll see that Alex in the CFO has 80% of his 2020 budget spent. But the reason that is the case is he had a huge influx of CARES funds that were in his budget that carried forward into 2021. So that is primarily why that big piece is there. The other real significant ones, and we knew this when we started to move funding from when we added dollars to the departments. The next one is Chris Schutte, the Office of Economic and Community Development. It looks like he's 70% spent, but we also recognize, basically that we added $22 million to Chris's budget. Those are grants, going out the door. And at the end of 2020, with those in his budget, all of those dollars had not been spent in 2020. Then the Assembly took action after the first of the year, and the balance of those unspent dollars were then reappropriated to those same programs because we budget on a calendar year. So the amount of money that we added from COVID in 2020, not all of it got spent. So when it looks like Mr. Schutte didn't spend all of his budget, and the good news is he didn't because he couldn't, because those monies were going out the door. The next two big ones, Lila, if you could just move down a couple to the fire department, which is 64% on the one more down. Yeah, if you go all the way over to the right, Lila, thank you. So what you see here is the fire department, they started off with $103 million approved budget. But what happened was, when the fire department spent their labor budget, it was then charged to the CARES grant, the COVID relief funds, to the tune of about $30 or $39 million, their labor budget. That as basically resulting in, they did not spend all of the tax money that had budgeted. They spent the COVID relief, which left them basically a percent of their approved budget unspent. So they ended the year with 64% of the approved budget spent. Now, what you don't see in here is the amount that they actually spent on COVID relief. We will add that in the narrative when we put that report to the assembly. So it looks weird that the fire department only spent 64% of their budget. And in fact, they spent more than $103 million last year. They spent what they had here in this budget, plus what they had in the public safety payroll. So it's a bit of an anomaly, requires some explanation. The reason I point it out is when you look over time, if you look last year, the year before that, this year, and then in the future, you're gonna, if you didn't know anything about first responder payroll, you would ask yourself, what happened to the fire department? They didn't spend 40% of their budget. Well, in fact, they did. They just used grant funds to do it. So the next big one I want to share with you is if you go down a couple to human resources, Lila, it says 62%. One of the things that happened here was when we sold ML&P, the PERS liability responsibility lands in human resources. So when we sold that liability, or when we sold ML&P, that PERS liability was the money to spend for that PERS liability was budgeted and put in human resources. Not all of it was spent last year, but they will then, not all the commitment was required. So they did not spend it all last year. They will spend it this year. We still are required and will be meeting that PERS liability requirement. In a short version, for those who might be familiar or might not be familiar with the state PERS system, when a classification of a certain classification of a job is created, and then it goes away, literally goes away. So we had job classifications that were specific and only identified in municipal light power. They do not exist anywhere else in the city. They do not exist anywhere else in the state, and they do not exist at CEA, which is not in PERS. So when you get rid of those classifications, the liability for those individuals in the PERS system still remains. So that liability payoff to the PERS was calculated and budgeted, and those payments are being made. That is why that PERS liability was unique to 2022 or 2020, because we sold the utility that year. A couple more highlights is, let's go down to the mayor, probably would be a unique one. The mayor, they had a little bit of dollars from COVID, or for the COVID-19 relief funds. The assembly offered them about $1.5 million in administrative dollars to help manage incidentals, as it were, help other small programs. And they didn't spend all of those dollars. They then will move or into 2021, or if the assembly or the next administration wants to reappropriate it, they can. But the fact is they were given those dollars in 2020. They just didn't spend them all in 2020. So that's why it looks like the mayor's office really was only at 85%. And the last two I want to point out is probably the police department. The police department, similar to the fire department, up a couple, Lila, 60% spent. Same story as fire. The police department was budgeted $121 million. They spent more than $121 million. It just so happened about 50 million of what they spent was allocated towards the first responder payroll under COVID-19. So that is why it looks odd. The fact is they did spend that much money. They just didn't spend it all in the operating budget. And so that is how, why that. So when you go to the bottom at 80%, 100% of the year, it looks like the city only spent 90% of its approved or 80% of its approved budget. That is true. But the fact is that other dollars were brought in to cover expenses after the budget was approved. So I'm going to stop there before I go to the next couple sheets, because that's a lot to digest before I go to the next sheet. And I can't see hands, so Jonathan, I'm going to ask you to help me. Oh, I can see Anna.
Anna has her hand up. Anna, go for it.
Yeah, I guess maybe just a general question. So can funds be rolled over into the next year or encumbered into the next year? And or does it depend on the funding source?
Door number 2 depends on the
Okay.
funding source. Yeah. Operating budget dollars, tax dollars to departments. If they are not spent, they roll into the fund balance program. They roll back into our savings account. They do not roll to the department the following year. Separate from that, the CARES or the ARPA funds this year that might roll to next year, they were specifically purposed for programs that didn't complete in 2020. They actually too go back into the savings account, but then the assembly reappropriated them back out of the savings account to programs that were approved in 2020. They actually had to do that because of the way our budgeting system works. So, and those, I would say 80% of those activities have occurred. There are a couple on the assembly agenda for the 22nd that were budgeted in 2020, did not finish in 2020 and expected to continue in 21, but it's using the CARES funds that were already received. It's not new and additional money.
Okay, and then I guess, well, one comment and then a follow-up question too. So I also understand things like HUD, maybe we've gotten money from, that we get from the federal government that is maybe linked to a prior fiscal year, but seems to be able to be allocated in a future year.
That's correct.
Okay. And then, sorry, my other follow-up question was just understanding the relationship. So let's say a department, like you said, spent 80% of its budget, and then the other 20% rolled back into the fund. That's probably unusual for the most part. But then the general budget for the following year, is that depending on the actuals, or is that still starting kind of with the budgeted amount?
So the following year is based on a continuation budget, not continuation actuals.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Okay. Any other questions for Lance?
Did somebody have a question? No? Okay. Lila, can you just go to the next page, and I'm gonna speed us up a little bit because there's a lot of information in here. So this next sheet here is basically the same piece of paper, but labor versus non-labor. So at 100% of the year, Lila, can if you just scroll down a little bit, or make it a little bit smaller before you, there you go. So departments on the left, budget actuals, whether they were over or under, you can go by department. Again, you can see, you know, the fire department is 52% spent. It's because we charged a lot to the grant. And you can see the police department is 50% spent. It's because we charged to the grant. We did not charge to the tax dollars. So the bottom line is that it looks like 70% of the approved budget was spent, which is of this. So that is exactly what happened. Obviously, those are the big anomalies. If you go over a little bit to the right, Lila, you look at this is the labor budget. With a few exceptions, most of the non-labor budget, except for probably Chris Schutte and the health department, most of the non-labor was already for departments was in the approved budget, and they spent about 90% of it. So. Okay. Lila,
Questions? Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna ask Lila to skip ahead a little bit. So skip page 3. Maybe if you overtime. The reason I wanted to just mention this one is we are required by code to report to the assembly too, not only the budget to actuals, but quarterly and at the end of the year, our overtime and our travel. So the overtime last year was totally whacked. So many things influenced it in so many different ways, mostly as a result of particularly the supporting departments related to the influx of the CARES funds and COVID-19 relief. So you can see the assembly was over a little bit, but they didn't have much budget anyway. I mean, really, they had very little. If you move down a little bit, finance was hit pretty hard. They budgeted 90,000, they spent 142, and a lot of setup time, so they were over their projection. The health department, that last year just kind of took them by storm. Normally in a regular year, they don't have a lot of OT, but with all of the programs they were managing and supporting, their overtime was really, really high. And I think a lot of that overtime was covered by CARES funds. It was an eligible expense, or FEMA reimbursable. I'm sorry, FEMA reimbursable. Then probably the next big ones were M&O. M&O is I don't remember if that actually, I think that might have had a little bit something to do with a heavy snow that we got at the end of the year, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to have to validate that one. Our department may, OMB, normally it's pretty light. We can manage it. It's just 2 pushes when we build the budget and adjust the budget. But with the CARES funds, we had a little extra activity there. And then I think the last big one I just want to point out is probably, let's see. I mean, I think that's probably about it. The big ones. Transit had public transportation had a big one. But overall, when you look at the total amount of budgets, the total of all departments, they're over for all departments. We had 83% of our all overtime budgets spent. Some of them just went over and some of them didn't spend very much.
Actually, amazing to me that the actual overtime budget, while the distribution was different, right? The actual overtime budget landed very close to the original budget, the original overtime budget.
Yes.
And so while our distribution was different than we would have expected, you know, those some of those things kind of balanced out with each other.
Yeah. So I'm gonna do travel, and then I'm gonna I'll highlight the utilities. I don't want to discredit any of them, but I also want to give you guys enough time to have some open discussion. The other thing we talked about is travel. So travel is, while not in a very big budget for the entire general government, this does not include the utilities. None of this conversation includes the utilities. I'll talk about them separately. The entire travel budget for all general government is $280,000. When we knew that we were going into potentially travel restrictions as a result of the pandemic, what we did is we basically took out everybody's travel budget. We even took it away from those individuals that had already spent some. So what they did is, since it's in their non-labor, we asked them to manage that $67,000 in actual expenses that they made between January and April when we put the brakes and took away their travel. So it looks like they were 800,000 or 800% overspent. I mean, in reality, they started with 281,000. Then we took it all away. When you consider what they'd already spent, that's how come that number is so, the percentage is so skewed, but in reality, the numbers are not. Does that make sense?
It does to me. Everybody else?
Okay, I think in future years, if we ever in this situation again, a lesson learned on our part is go back and find out from departments actually what they'd already spent before we had made the change. We knew we had some, we just didn't know that we had this much. I mean, the big ones we knew about, we kind of knew about APD and we knew about fire because keeping track of them. But the other ones were a bit of a surprise. They managed their non-labor budgets and they did great. And they pretty much all of those that had travel did a very good job managing the expenses they already had with other things they already planned to do. So I think what I'd like to do is just without going page by page, let me just we'll send you this report. And but let me just take one utility. Lila, can you just bring up the first utility? I think it's sewer, or skip hydro. Hydro is so brand new, it's not going to be so relevant. So when I send you these sheets, I want you to look at this sheet sort of divided in three pieces. The top two bold is operating revenue and non-operating revenue. So basically, for a utility or for the port or for Merrill Field, you're going to see these two categories. I will tell you that with the exception of the port and one of the other utilities, everybody was really, really close to their net operating budgeted income in 2020, which was really, really surprising. They initially thought that their revenue projections were down. So you're going to see numbers anywhere between 93 and 98%. The exceptions are going to be in the port. You're going to see you're going to see theirs as their actually net operating revenue was over 100%. Their dock fees came in a lot better than they thought, and their non-operating revenues came in better. But what you're going to see when you look at all these utilities across the board is their revenues outpaced their expenses. And they did that by managing their expenses. So Lila, I'm going to ask you to scroll down a little bit. So when you see these sheets, the top two are revenues. The bottom two big ones are operating expenses and non-operating expenses. Non-operating expenses, as you can see here, and they'll be similar, whether it's debt or bonds or loans or whatever it might be for each department. Those are non-operating expenses. You will see that pretty much in every category, the exception will be in solid waste, will be the other one. And I think it's in their disposal. And every department, their expenses were in the 90% range. You know, they were way, way down. And so the bottom line is when you go to the bottom of each of these pages, can you scroll down to the bottom line on this sheet? You'll see the very bottom line where it says this is kind of the balancing of the amount appropriated the cost in cash. When that's kind of how the department ended. When you blend their expenses and their revenues, where did they end up? So for this one here, for AWW sewer, basically they were 89% of their approved budget, which is really, really good. AWU, probably more than any other, really took it to manage their expenses right off the bat. So they all did exceptionally well, and sometimes we even saw some surprises in the revenues coming in the door. And where we did, their expenses might have been a little bit higher, but they did so because they knew their expenses were coming in. So I will leave it at that. And I wasn't surprised what I saw, but at the year-end close, I was happy to see that what I was expecting to see really was true. So again, this will be a final to the assembly on the 22nd. It'll obviously be posted available to the BAC members. You guys can take a look at it if you have questions. So I'm going to leave it at that right there. That makes sense. 2020 was given them.
So commentary or questions for Lance? I mean, a lot of credit there to the utilities. I mean, I think it's an indication of the quality of management at the utilities that they were able to, they managed their costs well because they didn't know what revenues were going to be, and also obviously a little bit of luck there that revenues weren't as impacted as could have been impacted. But that stability and solid management, I think, bodes well for what the utilities are doing, and the municipality's stewardship of those resources.
I would when this becomes available online, I would ask you guys as we're putting together our. Actually, I will just send it to you. When we get to the department head meetings, this will give you a sense of how your departments were budgeted and ended in 2020. That might offer some insight to 2022, because they'll tell you'll be able to see how they did last year. They'll be able to tell you how they're doing this year. And you might ask might give you some insight to what they could see in the future. Okay. Lila, could you go back to the agenda, please, if there are no questions?
All right. Believe that the next item on our agenda is public commentary. Is that the case? Okay,
No,
I
have one
We've
more.
got one other thing. Okay.
I have one other thing. I don't have a screen to show you, but I did mention that I wanted to share with you guys, because this might be my last meeting with you as OMB. One of the things I want to let you guys know is how we're doing in first quarter. I mentioned in the last report that basically 2020 just closed. We really can't start closing budget to actuals for January, February, or any month in 21 until 2020 is done. But we put together what we do know, and at the end of until we can verify some of the actuals. But I think what I'm seeing right now, when you look at the end of March, which is the end of the first quarter, we were about 25% through the year, and our percent of our budget spent was about 20%. That includes our labor and our non-labor. We have encumbered another 8%, which means we've set aside for expenses that we know we're going to do. So frankly, we're really right on track. This is normally in the first quarter, we're spent basically between about 19.5% and about 22% when we're at 24% through the year. And a lot of it has to do with the cycle of when bills are due or contracts are due or leases are due, things like that. So right now, I think the departments are they're right on track. I asked Lila to give me a little quick sneak peek, and I took a look at how May is looking. And May is still looking really good. At the end of May, we're 40% through the year, and we're at about 38% spent. And I think, and if we were looking at encumbrances, we're at about 43%. So right now, 21 is looking really good, and I'm happy to report that. So as soon as I'm confident that January, February, and March actuals are done, this first quarter report for 2022 for a budget to actuals will get to you, and then I expect the controller will be closing them rapidly, and we'll be able to get you the second quarter report for April, May, and June. So that's a little look ahead.
All right. Any questions for Lance and the OMB team? Okay. Do we have 6D, the infamous other? Is there anything other?
I don't have anything for you. I put this on there in the event that if you guys had some additions to the agenda as an informational item, we just plug it in there. But I don't have anything.
Yes, Anna.
Thanks. So I don't know if it's, we could put this under, and I maybe should have thought to amend the agenda, but I had a request come in that I wanted to share back with this group. I did already share it with, well, Alyssa's email that she may not have looked at, and Lance and Jonathan about an educational session or video series. So I don't know if we want to cover that now or under open discussion.
Yeah, go ahead and at least describe the opportunity for folks.
Sure. So I wasn't very familiar with this, but I know there are folks at the Muni who have been working on basically Municipality 101 video series recording. So I know it was everything from how to participate in an assembly meeting to just generally educating how city processes work. So I got an email from, I believe, Claire Ross, because she had gotten a question at the library and she knew she wasn't the right one to speak to this, but it was a presentation. It's intended to be focused and appropriate for folks for whom English is a second language or English learners. So kind of, simple, straightforward, public facing communication about the municipal budget. And I know that's something that obviously, Lance, you would be a good candidate to do, but you have a lot going on. So they are trying to find somebody who would be available to do that. I believe it's live and then it'll be recorded. It's by Zoom, and it would be later in June. So I brought it up because I don't know that I'm the right one to speak to that, but it does seem like a great thing for someone on the Budget Advisory Commission to briefly present. And I believe it'll be the session that they sent around is part about municipal elections and part about the budget. So I had recommended those are both two big topics, but if they do have to be combined, I think it would be a high level overview of, kind of how the budget is built when it's approved, just the basics.
Okay.
Anna, I found out today, I didn't know if it was in person or Zoom, so I'm going to do it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But I also think it might be good if, if any BAC member wants to listen in, or it would be great to have some company. So if it's 6 o'clock on the 24th. Is that correct, Lila? I think it is.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Okay. And then just for reference, I will forward the information that I got to Lila so she can share it with the group, because it actually looks like a really cool series that you might want to share around, not just for that session, but other ones as well.
Go ahead, Lance.
Those who might be around, the municipality did something like this, oh my goodness, 15 years ago or more, and it was called Muniversity. And they were presentations that were made on capital budgets, operating, how meetings are run. They was just really, really simple. They were all recorded. They were all made available online. The presentations were made available online. Obviously, the technology is advanced and the ability to share, how the information was shared. But it was a lot of fun. I did it at a time when I was in the transportation, heavily in transportation, budgeting and planning and programming. And so yeah, it's a cool thing to do. I'm glad they're resurrecting something like that.
Excellent. Okay. All right. So we're gonna circulate that around, and we are, if you're interested in participating, let us know. I'll talk with Alyssa and see if she's interested. Nolan, you might also be a good candidate, having served as a past chair to go and speak. So if I know your life in your house is also busy. Anything else under other, and then we'll move to audience participation. All right. Do we have any audience members? Do we have any citizens of the municipality of Anchorage beyond the commission and staff? All right. Not hearing anything. It's time for BAC open discussion. Any topics here as we hit the early part of summer that people would like to kick out there to stimulate thought or raise to people's attention? Go ahead, Anna.
Hi, thanks. Sorry, I guess maybe I'm always just quickest on the raise hand. But one thing I just wanted to note is, so the Assembly had already appropriated or recently appropriated the first kind of tranche of ARPA funding, the American Rescue Plan Act. And my understanding is the municipality is getting that in two chunks. So this was the first half. And then I know there was an ask to the Budget Advisory Commission about kind of given that there's some time to think about recommendations for that second tranche, which I think comes a year from now, more or less. So I know that we've talked in the past about kind of what that process looks like. So I know it's not time sensitive probably for the summer, but I just wanted to flag that for folks as something to think about. Because I know part of the discussion was thinking not so much about immediate relief, the way that the focus has been now, but looking ahead, the funding could be for infrastructure improvements or kind of really more forward-looking recovery and revitalization of the municipality. So just wanted to flag that and see if there's other thoughts about when we might want to take that up.
Okay, that's excellent. Anybody else? Commentary, open discussion about things such as what Anna raised or other topics that are on people's minds. I'll talk while you're thinking. I'll toss one out there. It's been 14 or 15 months since we met in person, and the next couple of months possibly raise the opportunity for us to meet together in person again. I'm not sure of where the municipality is on in-person meetings, but perhaps when we elect the next chair in July, one of the things that we can talk about is whether we're going to stay virtual permanently or whether we're going to try and come back together and get to know each other and see each other physically and in person. I do think that while these are convenient because nobody has to travel, there is something about being face to face that is really, really important in terms of human connection, efficacy, and collaboration. So that's my pitch. Tasha.
Thank you. So I had made some personal comments to the Assembly about their Recovery Act fund usage. And one of them, I thought maybe folks could just think about. One of the entities that they had chosen to receive funding is a new one that started in March of last year. And my comment to them had been that people who own businesses, their requirement to get relief funds from the programs that they're starting, they had to have been in operation since January of last year. Or if they were a nonprofit, they had to have been in business for 2 years to be eligible for funds. So I thought that was maybe an unfair allocation to a business who wouldn't qualify through one of the programs being offered to get direct funding from the Muni. And also, as we're looking at things opening back up, I personally know 3 people who tested 2 days ago positive for COVID that have been vaccinated. So we think it's the new strain, just like how that's going to impact things moving forward, because I didn't see a whole lot of allocation for, you know, what happens when the variant arrives and we haven't hit herd immunity for, you know, budget wise, what's our plan of action?
Yeah, so Tasha, those are great points. Really appreciate both of those. That, you know, the second one I'm much more familiar with, right? I mean, this is the Delta variant, which is the Indian variant, possibly arriving in town. You know, you can still get COVID even if you're vaccinated, although your risk of serious illness is extremely low. But I too, like you know, you guys know I've written a weekly kind of COVID update. I took a break a couple weeks ago for some travel and came back and was really surprised that our vaccination rates here, particularly at the statewide level, have not moved much in the last month. And there are some parts of the state, including Anchorage, but Anchorage is better off than most parts, that are not as vaccinated as we would like to see. And we're running a really significant risk of outbreaks, particularly this fall when people go back inside. And I'm thinking about that moment when all the kids go back to school and the weather gets cold and we all go back. Given how things are, we should be prepared that, and the municipality should be prepared that we could have some pop-up outbreaks in town. So Carolyn is on the phone only. She would like to speak, relaying her text message. Carolyn, please pop in. Thank you, Anna.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Anna, for flagging this for me. I just wanted to speak to the idea of having in-person meetings. As being one of the newer members to the commission, I'm very interested in meeting in person and getting to know everybody, and yeah, just trying to just, I guess, better integrate myself into the group and feeling more comfortable. But I absolutely do appreciate that with the very strong likelihood that there's a new variant in town, that we should exercise caution. So I'm really interested in seeing what the group kind of like mulls over the course of the next month and how we choose to move forward. So thank you. And then also one other point I wanted to just bring up, and unless I missed this, and I apologize if I did we miss the assembly report because Assemblymember Perez-Revilla in La France were not able to make it? And if so, Lance, were you going to offer a brief update? I might have missed that. I apologize. I'm in travel status, but I have been listening intently. Thank you.
We appreciate, Carolyn, you taking the time while in travel status to call in. That appreciate that level of dedication. Lance, is there any assembly update that you'd like to add?
Just a couple things. The Assembly is looking at accepting about $40 million in grants from Maritime Administration to support the port's redevelopment, which is a really big thing. They are also looking to make some final appropriations from 2020 fund balance to those programs that we had already planned on doing. I think there's some rental assistance in there. There's something maybe for the Boys and Girls Club, a couple small things the Assembly is going to be picking up. So I don't anticipate there being any controversy on any one of those topics. And obviously the Assembly's got a couple controversial things related to B3 zoning and licensing for shelters. They've been working through, but I think from a budget perspective, they are pretty much at a time in their schedule where they're not seeing a lot of budget stuff. They're obviously going to get this. Dan Moore in Treasury will start his providing maybe this month, next month for sure, his monthly revenue projections to the Assembly. And then we will be getting those as well to know how we're doing on our revenue projections. So I think those are the highlights. Obviously the Assembly has got a lot going on. Getting the ARPA funds appropriated. They did that earlier this month. They're working on some additional resources to support other programs. Beans Cafe, I think, is one of them. Anyway, but most of their activity budget related has been the port and reappropriating the remaining balance of CARES Act funds from last year to this year, and they're getting the ARPA funds out on the street. So. And again, congratulations to Assemblymember LaFrance for being the chair. I think she'll make a great chair for the assembly.
Awesome. All right, Ms. Brawley. I saw your hand up, Anna. Did you want to pop in, or was that just a leftover?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, Lance's comments prompted me to remember another thing I would be interested in for a future agenda, which is related to the revenue projections, but also a report out on the first few months of the alcohol tax. So I know there is a delay because it takes time to collect and then aggregate that out, and it only started in February. So I don't know at what point we would have maybe 4 or 5 months to look at, but I would be curious to see, how that's performing against projections and what they're expecting for the rest of the year.
I can tell you it's doing amazingly well projections. I think the first month we were at 93%, the second we were at 94, and now we're at 96 for the first 3 months reported of projected revenues.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, but I'm going to have Treasury give you their, send that to you guys. That's an excellent question, Anna. Thank you.
All right, Tasha.
Yeah, so Anna prompted me to think of, like, in the future, knowing that it's time to pay property taxes and how lots of people have been affected by COVID. I would be interested in knowing, as soon as we start getting those numbers in, how that's affected that source of revenue.
Mm. And I actually think that, just to add on to that, we could make that a general, businesses have over 30, over 60, over 90. So if we're seeing delayed payments on property taxes, or even delayed payments inside of our utilities, I'm working with a utility outside of state now, and their residential over 90, the number of customers has gone up by, or that are behind by more than 90 days, has gone up by a factor of 10. So I would be interested in hearing that about that for the other municipal businesses as well, because I think that let's tack that on there as a general topic. That's a great add, Tasha. Anybody else? Okay. All right. Well, if that's not it, or if that's it, it's 12:58. I'll entertain a motion to close. Or Lance, you look like you're about to say something. So
I do. We talked about even not having a July meeting, but having a work session, but it wasn't clear to me what the topic was going to be, if you wanted to have it. If you guys want to get together on July 1st, we can continue that right now, and then I'll work with Jonathan. I'll work with you and Alyssa on topics, and honestly, if they're not worth your time, then we can either cancel that one or others. But I think Nolan last month had, we have a lot going on, and skipping a month might not be good. So for now, we're scheduled for July 1st at noon or 11:30. So that's where we are. But I just want to make sure that we are not, you guys don't have something else in mind.
Nolan.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, didn't we have, I think maybe we had some of the push behind having a work session was about the use of the ARPA funds, but that kind of became moot since the Assembly, approved their breakdown and their framework for it. So that's kind of what I think that's my last recollection of some of the reason why we thought we needed one.
And I'd like to, we did just table the election until July. If we can, I'd like to, and if people are going to be around, it doesn't have to be a full meeting. If we get done early, we can, we can be done. But I do think that getting a timely election of a chair and vice chair is good, because it gives them the full year to work with the OMB staff. Nolan, did you have another comment, or is just your hand still raised?
Oh, no, I don't. Just didn't take it down. Sorry.
Okay. So it's now 1 o'clock. It sounds like we're planning on having, Tasha, please come back in. Okay. Oh, Tasha, is there any comment or?
No, I just was looking for the chat. It seems to be gone on my thing.
Oh, okay. All right. On that note, it sounds like we're looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved. This is Nolan.
Tasha, second.
All right. Any opposition? No. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you to staff for everything. Thank you to the members for coming today. And thank you for all of our speakers. We'll see you all July 1.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thanks,
Take care,
everyone.
guys.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.